Episode 3. Her task is Intermediary, Part 3. Rosalie leaves the room with a groan as she rubs her temples. The gods watch her as she walks past them, and Poseidon, Ares, and Demeter follow after her. "Rosalie, what is it?" Demeter asks, stopping the girl with a hand on her shoulder. The cafe owner turns and looks at the trio that followed her. She pinches the bridge of her nose with an exhale. "This situation has gotten blown way out of proportion," she says. Poseidon raises an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" he asks. "What happened in there?" "Zeus is under the impression that Hera's affair produced a child. She had brought the infant to the palace, and she was caught, as he says, red-handed," she says, motioning quotation marks in the air with her fingers. "Zeus overreacted, and that's why she escaped the palace." "Wait," Ares speaks up, baffled by what she's saying. "How do you know that father overreacted? Isn't the child proof that Hera really did have an affair?" The cafe owner lets out a groan at the god of war's severe lack of critical thinking. "Do you want me to hit you so hard upside the head that you experience cognitive recalibration?" Rosalie asks as she shoots a glare at Ares that immediately makes him take a step back. "Fair enough. It could be a misunderstanding," he stutters. "It is a misunderstanding," Rosalie emphasizes, her eyes narrowing all the more. "Hera would have had to have been missing for 9 months and hide the evidence of her pregnancy from everyone." "She was gone from Olympus for a time," Demeter points out. "But according to what Zeus has told me, those times weren't much longer than a week at the most, and this only started a few months ago." "What exactly did Zeus tell you?" Poseidon asks. Rosalie lets out a sigh. "Well..." 1 hour ago. After Rosalie's rage-induced screaming, virtually ripping Zeus a new one for his hypocrisy, she finally calms down enough to get the ruler of the gods to stop crying like a child and explain what happened before he had summoned the squall. "Hera has been visiting the human realm a lot more as of late," Zeus says, still sitting against the wall as Rosalie sits in front of him. "I hadn't thought anything of it. She has more devotees than me, so I figured she was busy working with the mortals who petitioned her." Understandable," the cafe owner nods with a hum. "Hera is the goddess of lawful marriage, family, childbirth, and women. Some even call on her for her rather righteous anger when it comes to being cheated on. But continue." Zeus looks at her, but he doesn't narrow his eyes at her. He knows better than to do that. "But a few months ago, she started receiving numerous offerings at her shrine," he says with a sigh. "Pomegranates, lilies, even poetry. Her attention became solely focused on the devotee who sent them, a human by the name of Blakely." Rosalie's eyes start to twitch, and she struggles to not let her temper get the best of her again. Even so, the situation becomes a bit more clear to her. Back to the present. Demeter hums softly at Rosalie's recollection of the time in the chamber with Zeus. Ares crosses his arms, trying to look smug, but anyone looking at his face can tell that he's confused. "Seriously, father is getting jealous of some human male named Blakely?" he huffs. "After all he's done to mother, for him to be losing himself over this." Rosalie puts her hand on her face. It's clear that Ares can't read between the lines. "Ares, trust me," she says with a sigh. "That was the first thing I brought up when he told me why he fritzed out. But that's not the point here." "Then what is?" Ares asks. "All I'm seeing is that mother's affair is real because there's a child." "Zeus didn't let Hera get a word in edgewise," Rosalie says. "And it's not an affair. Her affair would have had been going on for years at this point. Oh, and in case you've forgotten your own mother's accolades, she's the goddess of lawful marriage, meaning that she literally cannot cheat on Zeus even if she wanted to." "Then how do you explain the child by some human male?" Ares shouts. "Oh my gods, are you really that dense, you meathead?" "Enough!" Poseidon commands, causing both to look at him. As one of the big three of the Greek Pantheon, Poseidon was also not one to upset. Rosalie backs off with a sigh, rubbing her forehead, and Ares returns to his sulking. "Ares' inability to think aside," Poseidon says, after regaining his composure. "What do you plan on doing with this information, Rosalie?" "What I always do," the cafe owner shrugs. I'm going to set things right, and the first thing to do is to find Hera and see what she has to say. It's more to confirm a thought she has about the entire situation. Rosalie can already see what the truth is, but she does need Hera's side of things to really set the record straight. If you're looking for her, Demeter hums, she's probably at her temple. That's the direction her chariot was going. Rosalie nods to the goddess of the harvest. I'll take a Pegasus and head there immediately, she says. Could you three try to get Zeus back on his feet? He might be drinking again. Poseidon sighs and nods. Yeah, just leave it to me. Rosalie's eyes widen as Hera's temple comes into view from the back of the Pegasus Demeter had arranged for her travel. The beautiful white building is surrounded by small waterfalls and a garden of lilies, and she recognizes the chariot Hera had used to escape the clouds that had surrounded the palace in Zeus's tantrum. She's never been to any of the temples before. Well, none in the Greek Pantheon anyway. They're meant to be sacred and private spaces for each of the deities, so the young cafe owner never visits them without express permission. But it is an urgent matter. She'll ask for forgiveness from Hera later. Rosalie urges the Pegasus to land near the entrance of the temple, and when the winged horse lands, she dismounts and pauses to look up at the silvery white columns. She takes a deep breath and steps over the threshold. The temple face itself is the entrance to a magnificent garden of water fountains with water lilies and lotus flowers. Pomegranate trees line the outside of the garden, the largest being in the center. As Rosalie walks further into the temple's garden, the sounds of a cooing baby are heard. She follows the sounds, rounding a large central tree, and she sees a woman with long golden hair, not exactly blonde but not exactly tan either, sitting on a beautifully carved stone bench with a bundle of elegant fabric in her arms. The woman giggles as a small hand reaches from the bundle and grabs her finger. Hee hee. My, you're a playful one, aren't you? The woman has a sad smile on her face, and she doesn't look at Rosalie when she speaks again. So, you've come, she says. My apologies, Hera. Rosalie says, I know I should have asked. Nonsense, child, the woman Hera says as she turns to face her. You are not held by any restrictions. You're welcome here any time. Thank you, Your Highness. Hera sighs a little and then looks at the baby in her arms. Did that oaf of my husband send you? No, I came here of my own accord, she says. Zeus was too busy crying and wailing to give orders, as well as monstrously drinking. Don't worry, I have Poseidon and Demeter taking care of him. Hera's lips crack a dry smile and she lets out a chuckle. Yes, he certainly knows how to throw a tantrum, she says, and she motions for Rosalie to come closer and have a seat with her. Rosalie slowly walks forward and sits by the Queen of the Gods' side. She can see the baby clearly now. The infant's skin is olive-toned and has soft tufts of dark hair on his head. Hera, she speaks up softly after a few moments. What happened to Blakely? I know she's the child's mother. Hera lets out a soft chuckle. As perceptive as always, dearest Rosalie, she says. In truth, my dearest devotee, Blakely Connors, she died in childbirth. She was ill throughout the entirety of her pregnancy, and she knew that there was a chance that she wasn't going to live through it. Her voice cracked with rare emotion, and Rosalie could tell that tears were forming in her eyes. The last time she prayed, she asked that her passing at least be painless, and that I would find a home for her son, a real home. Her family couldn't have taken him in? She asks. Rosalie, there is no family, the goddess looks at the cafe owner. Blakely was an orphan, always going from one foster home to the next. She never had a real family. Rosalie is starting to understand the situation a whole lot more than she originally had. How long was Blakely your devotee? She asks. Hera bites the inside of her cheek a little, and she lets out a sigh. I have been watching over her since she was a little girl, she says. Blakely was like a daughter to me. This episode of Cafe Pantheon was written and recorded by yours truly, Kathleen Lyons. I hope you enjoy the adventures I've written for your viewing pleasure. If you want to follow for more updates, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Just look for Kat the Crowing Author or Kathleen Lyons. Cafe Pantheon is not my only story. I've written 2 other books, Arborea Lux and Seraphim Awakening, which are available on Amazon. If you enjoy paranormal dark fantasy with vampires, wolf shifters, magic, and bits and pieces of history and folklore, you'll enjoy my particular brand of immersive fiction. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll stick around for more adventures of the Cafe Pantheon.